There was a moment the numbers became impossible to ignore. Not a scandal, not a viral controversy, not an English crossover album designed to finally capture the American mainstream. Just data. When Bad Bunny became the most streamed artist in the world on Spotify. Not once, but repeatedly. Something structural shifted. Not loudly, not ceremonially, quietly, almost uncomfortably. He did it in Spanish. For decades, the formula had been predictable. If you wanted to dominate globally, you adapted to English. You could be massive in Latin America. You could sell out arenas in Europe. You could top regional charts. But true, uncontested global dominance, the kind that rewrites market assumptions, was assumed to require linguistic compromise. Bad Bunny refused that compromise. He did not soften his accent. He did not repackage himself for American radio. He did not create an English bridge album to ease executives into comfort. And yet, he dominated America anyway. That inversion is what shocked the system. For most of modern music history, the United States functioned as the gravitational center of global pop culture. Trends radiated outward. Artists from other regions adapted inward. The hierarchy was subtle but real. English language music was central. Everything else orbited it. Streaming flattened that hierarchy. Algorithms do not care about borders. They do not prioritize passports. They do not reward language preference. They respond to engagement. They respond to repetition. They respond to intensity. And global audiences were intensely engaged. When Un Verano Sin Ti became one of the most streamed albums in Spotify history, fully in Spanish, it did more than break records. It exposed a misconception. It revealed that the audience had already evolved beyond the industry's assumptions. Executives once believed language was a ceiling. It turned out to be irrelevant. There is something psychologically destabilizing about that realization. For decades, artists translated themselves to enter the American mainstream. Accents were softened, lyrics were rewritten. Cultural nuance was diluted for accessibility. It was not always malicious. Often it was pragmatic. That was the cost of entry. Bad Bunny eliminated the cost. He did not cross over. The audience crossed toward him. American arenas filled with fans screaming Spanish lyrics word for word. Festival crowds memorized entire verses without translation. Coachella, one of the most symbolically American stages in global music, was headlined by a Spanish-language artist who did not apologize for cultural specificity. That image matters because it represents more than fandom. It represents adaptation. Instead of the artist adapting to the center adapted to the artist. That is a power shift. For decades, America exported culture outward at scale. Hollywood films, pop stars, hip-hop, rock. The flow was predominantly one-directional. Other cultures influenced but rarely displaced the center of gravity. Streaming decentralized that model. Now culture flows multidirectionally. Puerto Rico influences New York. Latin trap influences London. Afrobeats influences Los Angeles. K-pop influences Paris. The audience is no longer geographically confined. Taste travels instantly. Bad Bunny rose precisely at the moment this decentralization matured. He did not create the shift alone, but he became its most visible proof. There is also economic evidence behind the cultural narrative. Latin music revenue in the United States has broken records year after year. Spanish-language tracks regularly chart on the Billboard Hot 100, not confined to Latin categories, but integrated into the mainstream. Tour revenue numbers placed him alongside, and in some cases above, legacy English-speaking rock and pop giants. When financial dominance aligns with cultural expansion, resistance collapses. You can dismiss cultural movements as niche. You cannot dismiss revenue. When stadium tours generate historic gross earnings, language stops being framed as a barrier. It becomes a multiplier. There is another layer that makes this moment even more complex. His ascent occurred during a period of political tension in the United States around identity, language, and borders. Spanish, in certain narratives, was framed as foreign or secondary. Yet simultaneously, Spanish-language music was dominating American charts. That contradiction exposed something deeper. Cultural consumption does not always align with political rhetoric. Audiences are often more fluid, more open, more curious than institutions assume. While some debates framed language as divisive, streaming data showed it was unifying. People were not waiting for translation. They were pressing play. Bad Bunny did not deliver speeches positioning himself as a cultural revolutionary. He did not brand himself as a political symbol. He did not construct his success around confrontation. He simply continued creating in his own language, at scale, with consistency. Consistency amplified the disruption. When something happens once, it can be dismissed as anomaly. When it happens repeatedly, it becomes trend. When it dominates for years, it becomes structural. He was the most streamed artist globally multiple times. Not the most streamed Latin artist, the most streamed artist. That distinction matters. It removes qualifiers. It removes asterisks. It removes the psychological safety net that once categorized non-English music as adjacent rather than central. What made this even more significant was timing. Younger audiences globally are growing up in multilingual digital environments. Playlists blend languages effortlessly. Social media collapses geographic distance. The idea that mainstream must be monolingual feels outdated to a generation raised on algorithmic diversity. Bad Bunny did not force audiences to adapt. He emerged as audiences were already adapting, but he had the discipline not to dilute himself in anticipation. That restraint preserved authenticity, and authenticity scales faster than manufactured universality. There is a paradox embedded here. The more culturally specific he remained, the more universal he became. Spanish carried rhythm, intimacy, slang, regional texture. Instead of sanding those edges down, he amplified them. The edges became the appeal. Cultural specificity became competitive advantage. When American fans memorize Spanish lyrics without full comprehension, something subtle happens. Emotion overrides vocabulary. Rhythm overrides translation. The experience becomes shared rather than segmented. That shared experience is globalism in practice, not theory. And once audiences demonstrate willingness to engage beyond language, the old gatekeeping logic collapses. The music industry historically assumed English was the gateway. He proved the gateway had dissolved. This is why his dominance feels bigger than individual success. It feels structural. It suggests that global fame is no longer mediated by a single linguistic filter. It suggests that the next wave of global icons may emerge fully rooted in their own languages, cultures, and identities without compromise. He did not conquer America by assimilation. He influenced America through consistency. That is different. Assimilation reinforces hierarchy. Influence redistributes it. The kid from Vega Baja did not set out to become a geopolitical symbol. He stocked shelves, he uploaded music, he built momentum organically. But by staying anchored in Spanish while achieving unmatched global scale, he became living evidence that the map had changed. He did not need to become American to become global. He became global, and America adjusted. That adjustment is the real headline, because once a center adjusts, it is no longer the unquestioned center. And once that realization spreads, the next generation of artists does not ask for permission to stay rooted. They assume they can. That psychological shift might be the most lasting impact of all. Not the streams, not the tours, not the awards. The removal of the ceiling. He didn't just top charts, he exposed that the charts had already changed. And once that truth becomes visible, the industry cannot return to its old assumptions. That is not just success, that is structural disruption.